Our next presentation will be done by the teleconference line. Our speaker will be Mr. Tony Serafini. Tony is with the Office of Engineering and Technology of the Federal Communications Commission. And Tony's topic he's going to share with us today is FCC radio licensing of space stations. And Tony, we have over 100 attendees here in the room with us, and they're all excited and enthusiastic about the upcoming CubeQuest Challenge. And so when you're available, or when you're ready, the speaker is set up, and so we're ready to go.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Can you hear me okay?
Can everybody hear Tony okay on the?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're good. Yeah, thanks, Tony. We're
Okay,
good.
and the cover slide is up as well?
And we have the cover slide is up. And just
Okay, great. Good morning. I thank NASA for inviting FCC and allowing us to participate. As Jim said, I'm an engineer in the FCC's experimental licensing branch, and just wanted to give you all a quick snapshot of the experimental licensing process and how it's relevant to the CubeQuest challenge. If you can go to slide 2, please. So the FCC experimental service handles licensing of short-term testing, development, military contracts, basically anything that's outside of the existing licensing services. And so that is why the CubeQuest challenge would end up in our area under the FCC rules for Part 5 is the part that we administer, and it is delegated to the Office of Engineering Technology. We pretty much handle DC to daylight, everything that is short-term, and the key point is that it is on a non-interference and unprotected basis. So you are subject to existing licensees and must cooperate with them. We're a small group. We work directly with the applicants by phone and email, and very accessible to folks looking to get authorizations from the FCC. A couple things we don't do is we don't help with the design of people's projects or help them pick frequencies. We can advise them and kind of guide them, but giving the vast array of services that we deal with, it would just be impossible to get into those kind of details with folks. So it's kind of a snapshot of what we do. Next slide, please. So as far as your specific area, and this will be the nuts and bolts of what you'll need to do to get a frequency license from the FCC. The experimental system is accessible through our FCC main website there. You can see fcc.gov/ELS. It is completely electronic. One quick point, if there is a fee for applications at $65, but it is fee exempt for educational institutions as well. So once you get to that, if you're an educational institution. A key point is the filing timeline. One thing we run into is folks are focused on the actual date of operation when the launch timelines generally are interested in the integration date. So the launch folks are looking to have your authorization in hand before they integrate you. So it would be beneficial if you had come to the FCC, say 6 months 3 months to give us enough time before the integration date. So that'll probably bump back your timeline. That's a real important point to consider. And then just the nature of the QPES challenge is forging new ground, so you also want to add or give us enough time to just work through the unique situation that we will be coordinating with NASA and other agencies as well, based on the frequency that you may request. Types of things that the application will ask for, the basic admin type, name, address. The technical information will be the frequency, power, bandwidth, and emission. And then we will ask that you upload PDF exhibits that will describe your project and lay out exactly what you're doing. Some specifics to consider if you're looking at a amateur frequency. There's the International Amateur Radio Union, the IARU, and they're a volunteer organization that coordinates space amateur frequencies, and you'll want to contact them to prior coordinate a frequency before you file with the FCC. Typically for CubeSat and space operations, we'd ask for orbital debris studies and space cap and other things like that, which, like I said, because of the unique nature of the CubeQuest, we may be looking at that, but how things apply in this specific situation. Next slide, please, number 4. So as far as frequencies, several options for you to consider. The existing FCC satellite bands or space bands, these can be found in the Part 25 of our rules. They are already allocated for space operations. You'll need to consider licensees for each band that you may be looking at, just to make sure it's going to be compatible and not be an obvious problem. A lot of CubeSat operators have been looking at off-the-shelf equipment, and that tends to put them into the amateur bands. I mentioned earlier, you want to take a look at the IARU website listed there on the slide, and several bands are heavily used by the amateurs, in particular the 144 to 146 megahertz band. The IARU is no longer coordinating requests in that band. So you want to steer away from that band in particular. The same with the availability of Part 15 equipment that may try to put you in a 2.4 gigahertz band that may or may not be useful to you, depending on the congestion in that band. But those are 3 areas that you'll probably take a look at and consider picking frequencies from those areas. The next slide. And so this slide 5 here gives you an example of the basic process we go through when, say, we get a CubeSat application. So if the applicant picks an amateur frequency, the slide is showing that you would want to pre-coordinate that with the IARU first, and then develop your ODAR, your space cap, and other documents, gather them up, file on the FCC website, looking at the left hand of the slide, as you, the number 1, have ELS system online, and it would come into our branch. Now we're only about four folks in a branch, chief, and depending on the name of your company, it'll be divvied up to one of us. Once we review it, we on a case-by-case basis, we'll get back to the applicants if there's things that we need additional information. If it is a shared or government exclusive frequency, we will work with NTIA on our side to coordinate that frequency and address any concerns from federal users. And then they will return a approval to us. Our internal process, OET, and the experimental branch will work with our folks in the international branch to address the ITU issues as well. And then once we have all the approvals, the experimental branch is basically acting as a liaison for you through this process. We'll issue the license and get that granted for you. And so that is just a quick overview of how we typically do it with CubeSat. Your conditions may be a little bit different. The ODAR and end-of-life mission issues be a little bit different, but that's basically what we're going through once we get an application. And then just the next slide.
And Tony, not to interrupt, but
Sure.
I've been asked to let you know that there's 4 minutes left.
Sure. Great, perfect. Here, I know that it was a quick snapshot for you. So the last slide has numbers that you can reach the FCC at. The first one is our administrative assistant, Nancy. If you have questions of where to find the FCC website, following general questions, she's a great resource. If you need IT help, just maybe a little hard to navigate, and Doug Young is the main contact for that. And then if you have specifics you want to get into as far as the challenge itself, my boss is Nake Nweke, and his number and my number on the slide as well. So hope that helps. We have 2 other engineers, Ben Corey and Leanne Nguyen, in our branch, and like I said, we're all fairly accessible, and look forward to working with you, and I hope this was helpful to you. And that's it.
Thanks, Tony. Are there questions in the audience? Okay, the guy in the back.
Yeah, hi Tony, this is Scott Pale from the University of Colorado, and I had a question which often comes up when you do experimental licensing, and that is the requirement to operate on a non-interference basis, and if interference is identified, the timeliness in which you must shut down, which often there's some confusion about what the expectation is there, how many ground stations you need to have, what sort of assets you need to have to be able to meet the legal requirement operating on an experimental license. And so could you give a little bit of a clarification for us to understand what those expectations might be? And then the second part of the question often comes up with how to handle that on some of these systems that are only half duplex, and there's a concern where the transmitter might be on.
Tony, could you hear the question okay?
It broke up the first part, I think, what was regarding shutting down or non-interference?
Yeah, that was the essence of the question, was if there's a directive to shut down because of interference, what is the time constraint on how quickly they need to respond to an order to shut down? And then there was a part B to the question, which was, remind me of the part B?
So the part B is that can also, there's a question about whether you have autonomy on your spacecraft, if you have a half duplex radio that will shut it down autonomously, if that's acceptable. There's always this question about a command not getting through.
So the part B of the question was, if you have half duplex radio capability and you're using autonomous ways of shutting down your radio, what's the time requirement for when that would have to automatically shut down a radio that's for interference reasons?
The time frame is sometimes adjusted. Typically we would have a point of contact listed in the application, and if it's a more critical frequency, in particular if it's on a government frequency, they may ask that it be shut down immediately or say within 24 hours. So it's really going to be based on the sensitivity of the frequency being used. 24 hours would probably be a max, but if a contact person is listed on the license, they should be available. They should be able to respond in a timely manner. There's no specific rule we have, but if it is a sensitive frequency, we may put a special condition on the license limiting, how much time you would have to turn it off.
Second question here?
Yeah, both U.S. federal law and international agreements preclude the use of amateur radio frequencies for pecuniary interests. Since this is a cash prize, how is that compatible with pecuniary interests to be able to use amateur frequencies?
Were you able to hear the question, Tony?
Yeah, I guess he was saying the amateur use of the frequency.
And in light of the fact that there's a cash prize award for winning the competitions, what's the bearing on the ability to license it to the amateur?
That would be something, I could defer to our folks here in the International and the Amateur Bureau. Like I said, we're looking at this. It's a new situation, but I would say our rules are based on, and what we look at in experimental service is someone trying to avoid the existing rules. And establish a service, and in this case, it would probably be an exception because you're not establishing a service using that for profit. It's more motivation from the challenge that was established by NASA. Maybe something the lawyers may need to look at, but I think they could probably find an exception for that.
Okay, we're out of time for questions. Hey, Tony, thanks a lot for taking time out of your schedule and joining us by telephone to the QQuest Challenge Summit. We really appreciate your time. And if people have additional questions, we'll make sure that they get your contact information. And thanks again.
All right, thanks for having me. Bye-bye.